Morning. This meeting is called to order. For the record, the time is 11 a.m. The date is Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. The commission and its staff are appearing from Helena, Montana in the Bollinger Room of the Montana Public Service Commission. I am Vice President Jennifer Fielder, and I am the presiding chairman for this meeting. Would you all please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And for the record, President Molnar, Commissioner Wellborn, and myself, Vice President Fielder, are present in the Bollinger Room, and we have Commissioner Bukacek and Commissioner Pinocci joining us remotely today. So we do have a quorum. For announcements, there are no changes to the agenda today. We do have one president's announcement, and that is that the selection panel for the executive director search will be comprised of President Brad Molnar, Vice President Jennifer Fielder, Commissioner Annie Bukacek, and Chief Legal Counsel Lucas Hamilton. And I will be chairing the panel. Without objection, that will be our panel for the process over the next few weeks. Okay, moving on. Is there any public comment today? Mr. Matson, can you hear us?
I just found my unmute button, so
We can hear
I
you.
assume, yeah, okay. Vice President,
Excuse me, please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
yeah, Vice President Fielder and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today. My name is Gary Matson, spelled M-A-T-S-O-N, and I live in Milltown, Montana. I'm here today on behalf of Northern Plains Resource Council, and we want to express our thanks for your efforts in opposing HB 363, a bill that would take away citizens' right to choose their commissioners. As you may be aware, Northern Plains is made up of thousands of Montanans who all interact with the PSC in different ways, whether it be because they are customers of one of our investor-owned utilities, have a pipeline on their land, or cross a railroad every day to get to work. They rely on you to ensure safe, reliable, and affordable services. These are big and important responsibilities, and we share your concern that legislative action could take away our right to choose who makes these decisions. Thank you for your efforts in pushing back against this dangerous legislation, and we look forward to joining you in the continuing effort to oppose it. Thanks again for this chance to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Matson. Are there any other public commenters online? And are there any public commenters in the room? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to action items. And that would be first action item is the approval of the commission minutes for the week of February 3rd, 2025. Do I hear a motion? Commissioner Wellborn?
I so move.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to approve the commission minutes for the week of February 3rd, 2025. Is there any discussion? Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor of Commissioner Wellborn's motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we will move into our first work session. And this is regarding docket number 2022.09.087. This is a commission initiated inquiry regarding data center loads. and to consider investigating how anticipated data center electricity needs affect existing customers. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Vice President Fielder, Commissioners. As described in the staff memorandum, this matter comes before you today following two press releases that Northwestern Energy issued in December of last year, that is 2024. Those press releases announced plans to bring in two large customers, two large loads to Northwestern's supply service. The total, at least initially, of those loads was more than 125 megawatts, with the potential to more than double by 2029. Copies of the press releases are included in your meeting materials today. The significant additions to Northwestern's electricity supply service may trigger some limitations and procedural requirements under the Reintegration Act, which is found in Title 69, Chapter 8 of Montana Code Annotated. At the request of President Molnar and Vice President Fielder, staff has prepared the draft letter that appears in your meeting materials and which was posted in draft form on Ready last week. In that letter, the commission asks Northwestern for its interpretation of the Reintegration Act and how it might be applied to these anticipated data center loads. If adopted by the commission, the draft letter will be submitted in the commission's open docket investigating Montana resource adequacy and risk profile. Furthermore, if the commission approves the draft letter, staff recommends the commission authorize staff to make non-substantive edits as we proofread and process this. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, are there any questions of staff before we entertain a motion on the matter? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion at this time. President Molnar.
Make a motion that we accept and distribute and post the letter as required.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, there is a motion and there is a second. Is there any discussion from commissioners? Any discussion? President Molnar.
I think that this is very timely. When you take a look at the megawatts that we're talking about here, we will soon be over the amount of megawatts that, if not already over the amount of megawatts generated by the Yellowstone plant. So if that becomes rate-based, that means everybody will be basically subsidizing one industry quite possibly, or it might require another one to be built. So the possibilities of that would be open to those that want to develop these centers are multiple, and we need to know exactly where we fall into that and where they fall into it. Are they a large customer group? Are they going to be just a regular customer who pays for substations, et cetera, that would go into these? It's the Wild West. We really don't know. So it's time to find out. And I appreciate the efforts in getting this handled quickly.
Thank you. Further discussion? I would concur that obtaining further information on the matter would be helpful and informative to the commission and to the public. So I appreciate the press releases that were given and the information that was provided in them, and concur with the need to find additional information on this. And so I'll be voting in favor of sending out this letter as well. Without further discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. The motion you have before you is to approve the draft letter to electric utilities in Montana, and of course, provide allowance for staff to make any clerical edits as needed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Okay, that concludes work session number 1, and now we'll go to work session number 2, legislative update to discuss bills relevant to PSC mission, statutory authority, administrative process, and general agency concerns, as well as to discuss any PSC related budget requests or presentations, and to consider staff analysis and recommendations and provide direction on PSC response to bills Welcome, Mr. Graff.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I will start this the way we always do with some previous action over the last week. We mentioned last week that the railway expansion bill could be subject to some future work. That work is coming to fruition. Our Budget Subcommittee D is going to hold a work session 8 a.m. Friday, February 14th to discuss the potential for adding some positions or some form of support for that expansion into the commission's budget request. So Mr. Sherwood and I will be there to help in that discussion. I wanted to sit down and get a better sense of some of the information that came out during the General Appropriations Committee process and discuss what could potentially be done going forward in the HB2 ask for the agency. The commission's bills, HB 45 and Senate bills 22, 23, and 51 are in the same spot as last week. They are in the second house awaiting the scheduling of committee hearings. As was mentioned in public comment, Commissioners Molnar and Fielder testified on House Bill 363, the commission restructuring bill. That bill still awaits executive action and spawned some further action from the commission. As a group of folks will be up tomorrow in House Energy to give a PSC overview of the agency's mission, purpose, and composition. That includes some division heads. Commissioner Fielder will be speaking, and that is close to set up. We're scheduled with the committee. So if you haven't heard from me today on that front and you're on the list, I will probably be circling back with you here in a bit just to make sure everything's on track. House Bill 314, creating the State Energy Authority, passed out of House Energy last night at about 6:45. The committee did amend the bill in one really significant way. As you might remember, the advisory board had a spot for commission representation, commerce representation, the Department of Environmental Quality representation, and a rep from the governor's office. That amendment changed those members from voting members to ex officio members as part of the group, and then narrowed the group a little bit. Took away some positions from 14 and I believe 12. I'd have to go back and look. My apologies. So with that, that's the previous action. If there's no questions on last week, we do have a chunk to look ahead to as far as new bills are concerned.
Go ahead.
The first of the,
Excuse me,
Oh.
did I see a hand raise?
Well,
Commissioner Wellborn.
more of a comment, and it can wait till the end, I suppose, but on, I think that I do like the idea of having Mr. Sherwood join you. I mean, because when it comes to appropriating money, it's easy to vote against what you don't understand. And I think that's where definitely where the rubber meets the road with that program. So I'm glad that you're moving forward with that plan. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry, and I was a little quick on the gun. Were there any other commissioners that had comments on what was just presented? Okay, hearing none, then go ahead, Mr. Graff.
okay, on to new legislation, most of which, apologies, dropped in the last 2 days. So you got some of these late, but that's the nature of the beast, I suppose. Senate Bill 283, you should have a copy of. It's one page. It sets wind turbine tower height requirements and lighting requirements. I brought this to you as we have had a lot of interest on the wind turbine front, and there are a suite of wind turbine bills. Essentially, a wind turbine may not exceed 350 feet in height. And in section 3, may not be excessively lit except for the minimum requirements set forth by the Federal Aviation Administration. That's the sum total of SB 283.
So that bill does not directly correlate to the commission's jurisdiction, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
SB 294 from Senator Andrea Olson, would require public utility planning for 100% renewable resources and planning for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. It requires those plans to be submitted to and reviewed by the Energy and Telecommunications Interim Committee. Requires a public comment process on those plans and the submission of recommendations to the 70th legislature regarding those plans.
Is there a schedule for that one yet?
There is not. It was introduced yesterday.
Okay.
A couple of resolutions to note regarding transmission. Senate Joint Resolution number 12 seeks an interim study on electric transmission capacity. It's very specific to the pass in and out of the state, very specific to the economic impact on citizens and industry due to observed congestion and curtailment of transmission paths. This appears to me to be a well-written study resolution, and you could consider taking a position in support and giving ETIC some work to do next interim. Next joint resolution, HJ 15, also pertains to transmission capacity. Essentially, the resolution states that the legislature understands that upgrading and expanding electric transmission infrastructure within Montana and on the transmission pathways across state borders is essential to ensure affordable and reliable electric service in Montana. Another fairly simple resolution.
Commissioner Wellborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Graff, would you remind us who the sponsors on those two?
Excuse me. SJ 12 is Greg Hunter, Senator Greg Hunter. And House Joint 15 is Representative Kometz.
Thank you.
So if there's no questions on those four, the last is a much
Well,
more.
I will ask a question, Mr. Graff. Were you hinting at the commission? Are you making a recommendation that the commission support either of these or look at them and consider supporting, discuss in the future? Or do you have a position on these? Or are you recommending a neutral stance?
Madam Chair, I think given the commission's interest in capacity and the future of the transmission system, these are pretty easy to support. They don't appear to create any real pitfalls. It's simply supporting the thought that we're probably going to need more transmission in the case of HJ 15 and supporting the thought that we should take a closer look at transmission, especially as it pertains to the pathways in and out of the state in SJ 12.
Okay. Do these have a schedule yet?
They do not.
What I'd recommend then to the commission is that we consider these and take a look at them on your own, ask any questions you need, and then possibly consider taking action next business meeting on these. And if we need to, for some reason, take urgent action, we can use one of our placeholder legislative meetings for that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the last bill, we're bringing you another LC because this is one of the big pieces of legislation that we've alluded to coming down the pike. LC 322 is a bill revising utility lines and facility laws. It allows the commission to grant a public utility a certificate of public convenience and necessity for transmission facility construction and establishes optional rate-making procedures and timelines for those transmission facilities. Wanted to get this one out in front of you early because there is likely going to be much discussion surrounding this bill, and I would anticipate they'll probably move pretty quickly to have a hearing, likely as soon as next week. So just to take you through this, on page 1, the definition section is definitely pertinent to the whole outcome of the bill. You'll see sub 1 provides a definition of advanced transmission technology. That transmission technology definition is taken from federal code. And on line 17 through the top of the next page, you can see it is a very broad definition of transmission technology. An initial question I have in this bill is that definition is mixing supply resources with transmission. You'll see in sub F and G, it includes energy storage and distributed generation as a measure of advanced transmission technology. On page 2, sub 2, on line 3, that certificate of public convenience and necessity is somewhat weirdly written, in my view. Might take a little cleanup. I think the intent is there, but I think it could be written more clearly. On page 2, line 4, this is where the first definition really comes into play. Transmission facility is defined, and it is explicitly stated that the term includes advanced transmission technology. So all of those things in the list in the first definition would be considered a transmission facility for the purposes of the next 2 sections. Section 2 is the certificate of public convenience and necessity. As you look through this, it creates a PCN. In a few points here, on line 12, it states, well, we'll just take the whole first line. A public utility or any other entity required to submit a certification application to the department pursuant to Title 75, Chapter 20. In my read, that means that this bill would put the PSC in charge of certifying public convenience and necessity for any transmission producer or developer, whether they are a public utility or not. So those private entities, like say your Grid United project, would be caught up in this because they are subject to Title 75, Chapter 20 processes. Line 16, the 270 days, I think we should be a bit wary of 270 days, having not been in the business of providing certificates of public convenience and necessity for specific transmission projects before. This bill does allow for the rate making or the rule making process to occur here. Might be worth an ask to see if there's any willingness to let us set a timeline based on going through what this process might look like in the future. If the bill were to pass. Sub 3 gets at the heart of why you would want a PCN. Essentially, if an entity is granted a PCN here at the commission, then they would not need to satisfy the MIFSA Major Facilities Siting Act requirements in Title 75-20, and those are listed there. I think the thing to note for you all is that sub 2, 75-20-301-2, gets into public health impact requirements, environmental impact requirements, as well as economic impact requirements. I think it's been a long-standing stance of this commission that the commission is not an environmental regulator and certainly isn't a public health regulator. So in subjecting us to the process that would essentially supersede that initial public interest establishment in MIFSA and these initial public health and environmental considerations, you may be creating a situation in which we have to do that here. So that's section 2. Section 3 is the optional rate making procedure. Essentially, I want to try to walk you through this slowly. Sub 1 says a public utility operating transmission facilities that are part of the bulk system and are subject to regulation by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and whose rates are set by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission using a formula rate process, are eligible for optional rate making. So if FERC sets your rate in a formula rate process, which they do, you are subject to or eligible for this optional treatment from you as a commission. Sub 2 says an eligible utility may establish the procedure in a general rate filing pursuant to 6933. So as part of a rate case, if the utility is eligible and the proposed optional rate making procedures are consistent with this section, key to note, the commission may approve the optional rate making procedures, and those will include the following. The revenues and costs associated with providing transmission service must be unbundled from the revenues and costs associated with providing all other services. So you're going to take this and hold it separate from the holistic look of revenues and costs in a rate case. It also goes on to state in 2A, cost recovery and savings from advanced transmission tech compared to legacy transmission tech must be considered over the expected life of the transmission line. We have some questions, some clarity to seek on that line, I believe, before you take a position on this bill. We're not quite sure what that means yet. We're working on it. And I would also like to note with sub 2A that we also aren't entirely sure that unbundling transmission service from the holistic analysis of all of their revenues and costs would not wholly subject them to FERC jurisdiction based on FERC rules. So some clarity is still needed in 2A from us as staff, and we've put our heads together and we're working on it. 2B, the rates associated with the provision of electric transmission service must be set annually using forecasted revenue and costs expected over a 12-month period, including forecasted revenues the utility anticipates it will collect from the provisions of FERC jurisdictional transmission service during that same period. I think one thing to note is this is asking for a 12-month forecast and then to come back at the end and see how far off we are or aren't and true up to a 12-month forecast. Have some questions surrounding what a base year might be or what you're going to set that forecast against in creating the 12-month period. In sub C, I, at the conclusion of each forecasted 12-month period, a utility shall make a filing to adjust for recovery what is above or below the actual prudently incurred costs and for any revenue the public utility receives from providing FERC jurisdictional services. There is a question procedurally as to when the prudency review would occur. Of course, the commission has rulemaking authority at the end of this section, but there is some need for procedural clarity that would either need to come in this bill or in the rulemaking subsequent to the bill. 2C, C2I, let's see here. If FERC grants the recovery of costs in the rate base during construction, the public utility may seek similar treatment of those costs through the optional rate making procedures described in this section. This needs some clarity in regards to accounting terminology surrounding construction work in progress. When exactly does that apply in the construction discussion? let's see. It also holds you in a position in which, if FERC grants the recovery of costs, the utility may seek similar treatment, but it's kind of at the discretion of a FERC decision, not a decision of this commission. Sub 3, page 3, line 25 states, following the initial implementation of unbundled electric transmission rates and optional rate making procedures, the commission shall do the following: authorize the utility to change the rates it charges that are associated with provision of transmission service on a schedule comparable to the schedule the public utility uses to change its FERC formula rates. That doesn't leave much discretion to the commission as to how you handle that. You would very broadly be required to conform with the schedule set forth in the FERC formula rates. Page 4, line 2 has to do with interim rates. As changes happen, the commission shall authorize a change in the rates associated with the provision of transmission service that is set to go into effect no later than 30 days from the date of filing on an interim basis. So if you were to enact an interim rate, you'd need to do it in 30 days. Sub 4 states this process is subject to MAPA. Sub 5 says the commission may adopt rules for the implementation of the section. I think the overarching point here is this bill appears to create an annual mini rate case for transmission at the commission. It's not a simple tracker. It kind of does it in the reverse of your simple trackers in the form of PCAM and things of that nature. And I think we still need some clarity as to the relationship between this process and the MIFSA process at DEQ. And I think we still need some clarity in regard to FERC jurisdiction in the case of unbundled transmission rates.
Okay, thank you. I see Commissioner Pinocchi's hand is up. Commissioner Pinocchi?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. So this is a long, complicated bill. Is this Olnikoff's bill?
It is.
So we sent out a notice after the election asking that any representative or senator that's going to have a bill written to do with energy, that they try to work with our office. This was done so that we would, hopefully we'd save time. It gets very difficult to go up and kill a bill on energy, and it can cause some hard feelings. So the encouragement was, if you're going to have a bill on energy, please reach out and work with our staff and our public service commissioners. And what I'd like to do here is ask, based on that notice email that was sent out, I requested a letter to be sent out, but all I got was an email. That is because I'm sure we're trying to save money, but some people prefer a letter, and emails can be so overwhelming that people just simply don't read them. But with that, I'd like to ask the commission to approve Trevor Graff and our staff to work with Zolnikoff on this bill. Is that something I need to do, Vice President Fielder, or do you think that Trevor Graff is able to work with myself and Zolnikoff on this very complicated bill?
Commissioner Pinocchi, thank you for the comment and the question. Once a bill is, once the commission takes a position on a bill, whether it's to oppose or support, then we can dedicate staff resources to that piece of legislation. If it's to monitor the bill and appear as an informational witness, I think the The work that's done is more to provide information to the committee and perhaps raise questions to gain clarification on areas that we may not understand. But in order to allocate staff resources to the legislation, it would need to be a commission bill or a commission-backed bill, a bill backed by a vote of the commission.
Follow up.
Yes, Commissioner.
Here's where it makes this difficult. And I believe this is going to be a good bill, but there's some questions that I'd like to work on before I present the commission to support the bill, right? So, for instance, we talk about environment in the bill, right? And that maybe we shouldn't be in the environment business. But when we look at safe, reliable, and affordable, if we can use a high-performance conductor and cut down the amount of fires, we're hoping by more than in half with the high-performance conductor, that all of a sudden we're cutting carbon, we're preventing forest fires, we're protecting lives. So then it's hard not to say, well, if you're going to challenge us with questions like the Public Service Commission has to do something about preventing fires started by utilities, then raising the standards becomes one of the important issues that we're going to have to deal with to achieve those goals. I believe we can make vast improvements in reducing fires and insurance and billions of dollars of damage. We simply have to raise the standards. So it's tough to do anything with one hand tied behind your back. How can I get us to work side by side? And I'm willing to put in all the hours on this project that's needed. And I have put a lot of time towards it, but I need to have staff work with myself and Zolnikoff to try to sort out all these questions. How can I do that before I ask to support the bill? Any ideas?
That's a good question, Commissioner. It is a complex piece of legislation, and we'd need to have, I think, some good answers before asking the commission to take a position on it. Staff can exercise their discretion on how much time they have available and whether it's a fit within, the workload that they have, and may be able to provide some help. But I don't think we can assign staff to actually draft a bill unless it's a commission bill. Is that your understanding, President Molnar?
It is. This is not a bill. It's not Commissioner Pinocchi's bill. It's Senator Zolnikoff's bill. I certainly assume that if, particularly after this work session, maybe Senator Zolnikoff would like to talk to Trevor Graff and dig a bit deeper into what his concerns might be. I have no problem whatsoever with Trevor deciding that he would do that, answer the questions, and go forward. And if Commissioner Pinocchi has questions for him to work with our staff or to talk with legislative services, if they will set aside some time, or Senator Zolnikoff, these things are all at his discretion. But for right now, there's many questions we have about this. Until we know what they are, we're not going to take a position, and therefore staff does not have direction that they must work in a certain direction. And I can't think of any way to state it other than if Commissioner Pinocchi has ideas, concerns, wants clarification, he may discuss that with staff, legal, or Trevor. He may discuss that with Zolnikoff, Senator Zolnikoff, or legislative services if they have time and wish to entertain his questions. But other than that, that's exactly where we are, and I don't think we're going any further.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Pinocchi.
So we send out a notice to the legislation saying, hey, if you're going to have a bill concerning energy, please reach out to our staff. How do we answer that? If we gave him the invite and now we need to help, should I have not had us send out that notice to encourage the legislation to work with us on an energy bill? What are your thoughts there?
Thank you, Commissioner Pinochi. No, I think your initiative that you've taken at the agency the last several sessions to make sure that type of notice goes out is very proactive and very good. I think where we're at is we're asking the legislature to, or legislators that have a bill to contact our staff to help gain clarification on things regarding our jurisdiction. But we're not offering to write their legislation for them. They have bill drafters for that. But Trevor, did you have a comment?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I just want to be clear. Representative Zolnikoff, or Senator Zolnikoff, sorry, has worked with us on this bill. And the biggest result of that discussion is instead of a shall on page 3, line 9, we got it backed off to may, as well as some of these deadlines, held in a little bit longer rather than shorter terms. So
Is Senator Zolnikoff asking for additional help on this at this time?
not currently.
Okay. So I think that's where we're at, Commissioner Pinochi. It's up to the senator if he wants and needs additional guidance from the agency or clarification, that we're available to provide that to any legislator within the limits that we have, considering we only have one Trevor Graff with us and we have several agency bills. If you do have something like this, and I know you're really passionate about this, and I know it's a complicated thing, but it could be very good. I don't know. I think your intent is really good, but if we can work on these like we do with the agency bills during the interim and bring them before the whole commission, like about a year before the legislature convenes, that's how we get our agency bill priorities identified. So that's circulated to all the commissioners a good year in advance of the session so we can flesh them out and arrive at a good piece of legislation going into session and not be stuck in the middle of something with a lot of question marks at this point. But I would say I'd echo the president's comments that, continue your work on it if you wish. And know, Senator Zolnikoff does know that the door is open for him to talk to our staff if he wishes to. And I think that's where it sits right now. I would say with these last 3 bills Trevor presented, it looks to me like for the time being, SJ 12, HJ 15, and LC 0322, which is the Zolnikoff bill we were just speaking of. We should definitely have our staff monitor and stay on top of these. And the commission should look at these closely and try to get clarification. And if the commission decides they want to move one way or another on them, then we can entertain a motion at a scheduled meeting for them. Any one or all. In the meanwhile, Trevor will act as an informational witness as a bill monitor without objection. Senator Wellborn.
Thank you. May I ask a question of Trevor, please? Thank you, Madam Chair. Trevor, are there any elements about this I don't remember any study bills out of last session that related to a lot of the stuff that's in here. So I guess that would be the first part of my question. I mean, I stand to be corrected, but if the answer is no, then was there any discussion during the interim with the ETIC committee regarding these that kind of help shape some of this, or is this, some of these, I guess what's in here, what discussions have been had and by who leading up to this point?
So in regard to LC 322, no, this is not the result of an interim committee study. There was some discussion of this bill early on, in which industry and some other folks passed some language and ideas around. We were part of those conversations early. We weren't part of those conversations in the middle of the process. And we've had a chance to look and voice some concerns as we've neared, well, the last month or so. So I would say this bill popped up on my radar in early November. Don't quote me on that. If you're really curious, I could go look, but so sort of in the normal form of someone bringing a bill to the legislature, there was and there is some ongoing work to try to get heads together, and that's where we sit. Now, currently, again, I think we have some pretty big questions to get answered. Those haven't entirely been answered yet. But there's work to do on this one for the time being, I think.
Commissioner Wilborn.
Thank you.
Okay, so Trevor, this bill has not been introduced yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's an LC title. And you said you expect it to move rather quickly when it does get introduced. So do you have a magic 8-ball or something? What's your feeling on the schedule of this thing?
My tea leaf read on this bill is that transmittal is coming quicker than folks think. They would need to probably get this out of committee by March 4th to meet the March 7th transmittal deadline. So given it's a Tuesday, Thursday committee, you could see, thanks to the process, it's going to take a day or two more to get introduced and referred to committee. A day with 3-day notice to schedule it. Maybe Thursday of next week, it could come up.
Okay.
And then certainly the week following, because we're starting to back into that region of the session in which you're up against it with the transmittal deadline.
So it's apparent that it needs a lot of work. I think that's not argued here today. Once it's introduced to the committee will have it. They'll hold the hearing, and the pros and cons will be pointed out. Question marks will be raised, and then the committee can do their work on it to try to straighten it out if they think it's policy they would like to see succeed. So there's, I guess, to go back to Commissioner Pinocci, I think probably, my recommendation would be unless and until the commission takes a position, just to try to work with committee members and the sponsor to help get it straightened out the best that you can. And if the committee indicates they want to, there's going to be a whole lot of resources. There'll be probably several legislators that might want to work on helping to get it straightened out with their legislative staff. So we aren't the only ones that can assist in that way.
Also worth pointing out that a viable strategy is to monitor it through this first house, see if we can get some answers to the questions. If we do, you could revisit taking a position on it. If we don't, you could also revisit taking a position on it, because if it does pass, this is still on the first house side and would go to the House of Representatives afterwards. So.
Okay. That seems like a viable plan to me. Are there any objections to monitoring and having Trevor serve as an informational witness at this time on SJ 12, HJ 15, LC 0322? President Molnar.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think that's the proper path to take. As we are confused with some of the language and the outcomes, I'm sure others will be. I think this bill is going to spend some time being amended, and the amendments then might raise more questions than answers. This thing is a long ways from the governor's desk.
Okay, anything else? Any other conversation on that topic? Seeing none. Trevor, do you have anything else for us today?
Just a bit of fair warning. Bills are starting to drop in quickly. I'm getting those to you for your packet as soon as possible. A lot of these dropped in the last 2 days. So keep your eyes peeled on ready. If any of the big ones drop in between, this one was pretty well timed for today. I will obviously let you all know. Just a reminder that the PSC overview is tomorrow at 3 p.m. in room 472. And the budget subcommittee D meeting is February 14th at 8 a.m. in room 317A.
Okay, thank you for that. President Molnar.
Yeah, what, could you state again what that first one was, the first?
Commissioner, the overview of the PSC's form, function, purpose, and composition that they requested after the appointment bill hearing.
Do we have one of those?
We do.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Graff. Seeing no further business before the commission, I will move to the final announcements then. We do have a business meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, February 18th. It will be held in the afternoon. So the business meeting will be at 1:30 p.m. and it will be preceded by our regular scheduling meeting at 1 p.m. that day. There is a possibility the commission will be, or at least a quorum of commissioners will be meeting to work on the selection process for the executive director, and we'll put up public notice if we're going to have a quorum meet this week on that, and if we decide to use any of our placeholders for any further legislative discussion where a quorum would be present. Are there any other announcements or business to come before the commission? Seeing none. The date is now, or the time is now 11:51 a.m. on February 11th, 2025, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.